is the Password Show, the show that clears up your thinking. And here's one person who stands up to reasoning pretty well. Gillian Hyde.
Thank you. Hello and welcome. The world is full of people asking questions. How do I get somewhere? Or can you explain why? Or what's the difference between... And they could be asking, for example, about two pieces of clothing or two countries, anything. It's the job of the answerer to interpret the question properly and then to answer convincingly. And a lot of people are going to be trying to convince us of things today. And us means you, me, and of course, Joe Kennedy and Philip Tanner. Come on down. Hi. How do you get to the town hall, Phil?
Oh, the town hall. It shouldn't be pulled down, you know. It's this lovely old building. It's got this clock that strikes the quarter-hour dong.
Phil, you're not telling me what I wanted to know.
And that's round one in a nutshell. Philip didn't answer the question, so all his argument about saving the town hall from the wreckers went for nothing. If it doesn't answer the question, your argument is no argument at all.
You know, I hate arguments because people get really nasty.
It's not that sort of an argument.
Let's get on with round one. On our board, behind each picture, is a question. Now, our contestants, a point for how well you understand and interpret the question and, of course, answer it. Joe, choose a picture.
I'll have the cameras, thanks.
The cameras, OK. What differences, Joe, what differences are there between these two cameras?
Well, one camera takes still photographs and it's small, it's quite compact really, and it's got attachments for flashes and there's
Joe, the question, what differences between the two?
Oh, right. Excuse me. Well, one takes still photographs and they're printed on paper, whereas the other one takes moving pictures.
Well, we got there at last. Well done. Philip, what will you have?
I'll have the rather bleak-looking picture of all the cracked mud. Thank you.
It is too, yes, scene of a drought. OK, a cause of. Philip, what might be a cause of this drought?
A period of very little rain can lead to drought, and also when...
That's fine, that's all we need. Right on target, Philip. Good. Joe?
The man with the suitcase, thanks.
The man... Oh, yes, looking a bit sus. Might be happening. Joe, what might be happening in this picture?
Well, that's a hard one. What about... I know. He's, the furtive man is sneaking out through the back fence.
Well, yes, could well be. Very interesting possibility there. Philip, what will you have?
Yeah, I might go for the car crash, thanks. I seem to like all the gloomy ones.
Yes, feeling a bit maudlin.
Yes.
What steps? OK, Philip, what steps would you take if you were at the scene?
Well, this could have been caused by careless driving, you see. A lot of...
Philip, watch my lips. What steps would you take?
Well, firstly, I'd find out whether anyone was injured, and then I'd call an ambulance. Then after this, I'd...
No, that's fine. Close shave there, but he got there at last. Joe, what will you have?
I'll take the graph, thank you.
The graph down here. Pie graph. I should just explain, Joe. This gives a breakdown of what the average Australian family spends per week, OK? Now, interpret. So how would you interpret this graph?
Well, according to the graph, a family spends 12% on clothing and footwear.
Well done. Not a moment's hesitation either. Interesting how you say graph and I say graph. Philip, you've got time for one more. What will it be?
I'll have the footy crowd, thanks. Or at least it looks like a footy crowd.
The footy crowd. Yes, here you go. What can you tell me about this crowd?
Well, most people go to the footy to see their team play and win. Some people will eat while they're at the footy.
They will probably do that, yes. That's good. Fine, Phil. Your time's up. We'll have a quick look, though, at the remaining three. Where are they? Here. What beliefs might this family group have? This building, how could you describe this building? And over here, what would happen if the man walks under the ladder? OK, well, a bit of a shaky start from you two, but you scored well in the end. Not a bad round. The scores are tied, I think, at the moment. Yes, that's right. Well done. It's going to be an interesting round two, and we'll be back with that in just a moment, so don't go away.
I have before me a treat for the whole family. A complete family meal in one plate that you'll feel happy serving because it's so nutritious. The light, fluffy pavlova base, crisp and delicious, suggests a celebration. It's low on cholesterol, no yolks, just the egg white. You can feel secure that you're giving your family good things. Spinach is the filling, a food long recognised as good food, high in vitamins and minerals. If you want to protect your family from those winter colds, feed them spinach. Now, I know a lot of you have got youngsters that might say yuck to spinach, but if you top it with some of these delicious strawberries, they won't be able to resist. And finally, for the protein that we all need, why not sardines? Convenience in a tin. A treat for the whole family that you'll feel happy serving, won't you?
We're back with round 2, and in this round we'll be checking out just how convincing some arguments really are. First one up for you, Joe, OK? Have a listen to this letter to the paper. Now, you can take some notes if you like, because in a moment I'm going to be asking for your assessment of just how good you think the argument really is. OK?
OK.
Here we go. Dear Sir, I believe that violence is a possible danger to the future of our world. By violence, I mean physical aggression by one person towards another person. My reasons? Many studies have shown that children copy what their heroes and heroines do in their favourite TV shows. For example, some children try to fly after seeing Superman movies. In many instances, what these heroes are doing is using violence to solve problems. I would argue that such shows are censored or not shown until after 9 p.m. If this were so, there would be greater chance of peace in the future. And it's signed Harold. OK, Joe, now what do you think about that?
Well, I wasn't put off by that argument. I thought it was fairly convincing, really.
Yes, OK, but why? Points for why you were convinced.
Well, he made a clear statement to start with, so I knew what he was going to talk about. And then he defined his terms. I knew what he meant about violence. Then he gave reasons and examples. And he suggested a cause of violence, but it didn't say that it was the only cause. And he was clear in his conclusion, possibly a chance of peace. Mind you, I'd like to see the studies of the effects of TV violence on people before I was totally convinced. But all in all, the case was stated, reasons were given, and to support the case, and conclusions were drawn. And I'd give Harold high points for his letter. My case rests.
Good, Joe, you've picked up some good points there. The letter was introduced well, the terms were defined, the reasons were clear, and there was a strong conclusion. All important ways of developing an argument. Good, Joe. OK, Philip, we've got one for you. This is the response to that letter, OK?
Right, yep.
You ready for this?
Sure.
Dear Sir, in response to your letter from Harold, violence is a fact of life that everyone must accept. Primitive societies have violence and they don't have TV. I watch TV for enjoyment, not for examples of how I should behave. And anyway, just as some fairy stories are violent and no one can say they're not good, then so too is some TV. What next will Harold be censoring from TV? The news? Because it's violent? Long live freedom of choice. And it's signed Maud. OK, Philip, now what's your assessment of that letter?
Right, I wasn't so sure about this one. It was fairly persuasive, but when you look at the thinking, it doesn't really hold water. I mean, first of all, quote, violence is a fact of life that everyone must accept. Well, I mean, just because it's all around us doesn't mean that we have to accept it. It's a fairly strong generalisation. The next statement about primitive societies not having TV, well, I don't really think that's relevant. I mean, Harold didn't suggest that TV was the only cause of violence, just a possible contributing cause. Then Maud has drawn some comparison with fairy stories and TV. Now, I'm not too sure whether this is a good comparison. She's taken for granted that we all think all fairy stories are good. Do we? And then, of course, last but not least, the next comparison is a bit questionable as well. It's between the news and TV programs. Maud says, what will Harold want to be censoring from television next? The news? Well, I think that's a bit of an emotional argument. I'd be very doubtful about giving many good points to Maud's letter. She hasn't convinced me and certainly hasn't given any good reasons for what the argument really is.
Good, Phil, that's well done. You've picked out some very important slips in that argument. Overgeneralisations, irrelevance, faulty comparisons and emotional arguments. Well done, well picked up, Philip. And at the end of that round, checking out the scores, they're still tied. Come on, we're going to have to find a winner in the next 2 rounds. Come on. We'll be back with the 3rd round in just a moment, so don't go away.
If you want to stay young and healthy, then you need this. Everyone agrees a healthy body means a healthy mind. So if you want to succeed, this is for you. Medical experts have said it develops muscles and helps people to lose weight. It'll help you develop a body like Rocky or Supergirl. It'll change your life and help you to develop self-confidence and meet new friends. Studies have shown a 5% increase in cardiovascular fitness after regular use. And we've had 400 letters from satisfied customers. You can't afford not to care for your body. Don't delay before it's too late. It's your key to health and happiness.
Don't do it. Why? Well, you just mustn't. That's not a good enough reason. Everybody says you shouldn't do it. I can make up my own mind. Just because everyone else thinks somehow, why should I? All the top fashion commentators say you shouldn't do it. And Lady Di. You're not convincing me, so what about those people? Well, when you do it, you'll hate yourself afterwards. How do you know? As a result of doing it, you'll feel really awful. You're predicting something on insufficient evidence. Statistics show that when you do it, you'll feel awful. Statistics can prove anything. All intelligence sends you unaware people don't do it. Now you're getting emotional. You can't get me on that one. Come on. After all, a carton of chips isn't all that bad, is it?
OK, round 3, and it's Dear Doris time. Mandy from Maroubra is on the line again. Mandy's just like family to us now, really. She's got a bit of a problem. OK, Mandy, let's have it.
Hi, dear Doris. Yep, guess what? Another problem. See, I'm now school captain, and in a meeting this week, we were discussing whether school uniforms were a good idea or not. And it's come down to 2 different recommendations, one for and one against. And guess what? I'm the casting vote. What I think will be the recommendation to the principal. It's just so hard to sort out one argument from the other and work out which arguments are the best. Now, see what you think. Now, one side thinks that uniforms are a good idea. They say, A, that people look the same, therefore they're equal, which is good. B, that other schools that have uniforms get better results. C, that uniforms are cheaper than having to buy and wear lots of different outfits. D, wearing uniforms shows school spirit, which is good because people like to feel like they belong. So here are the points on the other side. They say that uniforms destroy individuality and that everyone just looks the same. They say that uniforms aren't the point. The point is we need better facilities like sports grounds and science labs. They say that uniforms are really regimental and who wants to be in the army? They say that uniforms don't help study and that that's what's important, results. They say that kids don't like wearing uniforms. They prefer to wear jeans and T-shirts and they feel happier and therefore they study better. Oh, so there you go, dear Doris. How can I sort out these arguments? Help!
Hang in there, Mandy. Help is at hand. Philip, all those good arguments and on both sides, well, how can you help Mandy clarify the issues?
Mandy, I think there's a lot of faulty reasoning going on in these arguments.
Especially in the connection between one statement and the next. For example, even though people might look the same, well, almost the same, does it necessarily follow that they all are the same? I mean, either equal, as one side says, or lacking in individuality, as the other side contends.
Yes, and the connection between school uniforms and exam results, are they trying to say that what a person wears has some effect on how they think?
And there were a few comparisons too that I think you should look more closely at. One side says that uniforms are cheaper than a lot of different clothes. Is that the only alternative to uniforms?
Yes, and the other side compares school to the army because they both wear uniforms. Well, what do you think of that?
And how relevant is the issue of school sports grounds and labs to uniforms?
To the issue of getting results.
I think that if you're thinking about uniforms and whether they're good or bad, I don't think you should be sidetracked by other issues.
Well, you've really got your teeth into those arguments, panel. Well done. I wonder what Mandy will decide and why. What will be her good reasons? And at the end of that round, Joe, you just have the edge on Philip. But can she maintain that lead? We'll find out in just a moment.
Coming soon, our scientist has another bold experiment. Let her convince you of the best way to work things out.
I have a new product here that's designed to purify the water in fish tanks. But it hasn't been tested on fish yet. Does it affect the fish's behaviour? I could try it out on this one fish, but that wouldn't be very convincing. If the fish reacted, it could be due to other variables, the change in temperature in this lab, or anything really. But if I introduce a control, I can present a more reliable experiment. The containers are identical, the fish are similar. If I add the chemical to one, but not the other, I can compare and contrast the behaviour of the two fish. I can test the hypothesis. I can be clear about what is causing any changes in this fish. If it is the chemical, it won't be happening to this control fish. But if I observe changes to both the control and experimental fish, I can infer that the change is caused by something other than the chemical. Keeping control of variables is a vitally important part of experimental science.
For more controlled variables and fascinating experiments, tune in this week. And don't miss Furry Cutler as he reveals the secrets of his success.
Firstly, I'll let you know what I'm going to talk about. For example, the hazards of littering in the bush. Next, I don't make silly overgeneralisations, such as people who litter cause bushfires. But I back up careful generalisations with some examples. I report accurately what others have said and written. I analyse the causes of a problem and the effects of certain actions. Of course, my arguments are to convince you of my values. But I'll finish with something like my opening statements, now backed up by some good reasons.
Did you know that the three things most concerning a lot of people these days are unemployment, the nuclear debate, and drugs? Well, here's one of the big ones with serious and committed people on both sides. See what you think about this.
Today, is nuclear energy an acceptable form of power? With me is Jack Walker, spokesman for the Atomic Energy Commission, and Stephen Broadbent from the Movement Against Uranium Mining. First to you, Jack. Is nuclear energy safe?
Most certainly, and that is based on 30 years' use of nuclear power now as an energy source for producing electricity in many countries of the world.
How do you respond to those arguments, Stephen?
Well, like any industry, there are problems because people do make mistakes, and the hazards associated with nuclear power and uranium mining are so significant that we believe that they are not really an acceptable form of energy. This is because they involve with the release of radioactivity in the case of an accident, but also during the normal operation of nuclear power plants, there are releases, and we believe that these hazardous releases are already affecting communities that live around them, as well as the workers who also work within those nuclear facilities.
How economical is nuclear power?
Well, in many parts of the world, nuclear energy is the cheapest form of energy that is available. This doesn't say it's available at low cost to all areas of the world, but in some parts of those countries who have no indigenous fossil fuel reserves, nuclear energy is very cheap, much cheaper than other forms of energy. And this is borne out by the figures produced by the OECD, who have shown that of the US of A, Japan, and 8 European countries, in all but the US of A, were the cost of nuclear energy cheaper than other forms of power generation, and in the US of A, it was about the same.
What's your attitude to those statistics, Stephen?
Well, nuclear power was once promised to be a very, very cheap source of electricity. But in the last few years, it's become patently clear that it's not cheap at all. In fact, coal in the United States is turning out to be cheaper than nuclear power. And we also have to look at the long-term costs as well. For instance, what do we do about the nuclear waste problem and who pays for it? And also, what do we do about the reactors once they've finished their lifespan? That will also cost someone, and someone will have to pay for that.
What are the alternatives to nuclear power, Jack?
Nuclear power will be applied to some countries of the world, and in many countries of the world there'll be mixes of energy resources. Some will have fossil, some will have nuclear, some will have solar technologies, and each country will have a different mix, one to the other. But in those countries who have no fossil fuels for base electricity production, they will rely wholly and solely on nuclear energy for the next 50 years.
What do you see as the alternatives to nuclear power?
The alternatives to nuclear power are not simply looking at solutions like solar energy or wind power or those. They may play, as Jack mentions, an important role in our energy future, but it's really the way we live our lives, for instance, the kinds of electrical appliances we use. To give you an example, in the United States, an average refrigerator uses 6 times as much energy or electricity as does one that's been made in Denmark. That gives us an idea that we can, in fact, cut down our energy or our electricity consumption. But that does not mean that we have to affect our lifestyles. And if you look at this over a 15-year period, then it's quite possible to phase in new sources of energy like solar and others, as well as improving the efficiency of appliances and other industrial processes, as well as looking at ways of cutting down our consumption through energy conservation and better technologies. So we say over a period of time, it's quite possible for us to look at new sources of energy. But in the meantime, let's look at the way we live our lives and try to think of new ways of saving energy.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you very much, Jack.
Well, that discussion could easily go on with a lot more ideas and a lot more reasons being presented. It's interesting to listen to both sides of an argument because that can sometimes help to clarify your own values, and it can certainly add a lot to what you already think. But let's see how clearly Philip and Joe are thinking now as we go into the blanks game. You're both ready, aren't you?
Oh, of course,
yes. Of course, right. Now, you've seen the debate. According to that debate, Stephen said that with any industry there are blanks and that people make mistakes. Thinking seriously?
Right, yep.
Stephen said that with any industry there are blanks and that people make mistakes. How are we going there? Oh, it looks like a good long answer from Joe. What's it going to be?
Picnic spots.
Ridiculous. Get it out of my sight. I never want to see it again. Philip.
Problems.
Thank you very
like
much. There are
you.
problems and people make mistakes. OK, concentrating for the next one. Jack said that in some parts of the world, nuclear energy is the blank form of energy that is available. Jack said that in some parts of the world, nuclear energy is the blank form of energy that is available.
Do you want a copy? You might get it right.
OK, let's have a look at the answer. Philip.
Cheapest.
Thank you. That's what I wanted. And Joe?
The best.
Oh, I can't pay that, Joe. Best might have been implied, but it wasn't exactly what he said. Let's see how you go on the last one. OK. Jack said that it's a very blank industry. Come on, nice easy one, Joe. Jack said that it's a very blank industry. OK, let's have a look at those answers. Philip, it's a very...
Exciting.
I didn't hear him say that for a moment. What's that?
Safe.
Thanks, Joe. That's the one I wanted. Safe. That's all the questions we've got. It's game, set and match for you both. And our official scorekeeper has declared a tie. How's that?
Congratulations.
Congratulations both.
10 times. Where's our prize?
Yeah, prizes you want?
Sure.
Well, I'll just reach into the bottom of my pocket and produce 2 magnificent diamond set souvenirs. How's that? It's not often that you see real diamonds on torn up bits of paper.
No, Thank you very much.
Aren't they wonderful?
Yeah.
You can wear those with pride.
We will.
I'm sure. And now we've got another hot issue, immigration. Now, what do you think about immigration and why? I wonder if any of these arguments and opinions coming up support what you think, or do they argue against your thoughts? Have a look at this. It'll be your turn later.
My name's Mick. My parents came from Ireland. I'm Tony. I came here from Greece when I was 4.
I am Tran. I arrived in Australia 5 years ago. In 1986, the Australian government decided to increase immigrations. In 1985, about 84,000 immigrants came to Australia. By 1989, there should be 125,000 a year, eventually about 160,000 a year.
The questions are, how many immigrants should Australia accept, and from which countries?
In 1986, Australia's unemployment rate was nearly 8%. At the same time, there were many jobs that couldn't be filled.
Australia needs workers on hand from when the economy improves. Between 1950 and 1970, Australia's economic output grew by 5% each year. This was also a period of high immigration.
If there was no immigration, Australia's populations in the year 2000 would be 17 million. With immigration, the population will be 20 million.
It'll cost billions of dollars to provide an extra 3 million people with education, healthcare, electricity and other services.
Apart from refugee, the government requires immigrants to have job skills which Australia needs.
In 1982, about 10% of Australia's immigrants came from Vietnam.
In 1982, more immigrants came from New Zealand than Vietnam.
Australia has closer links with Britain than any other country. The British settled here 200 years ago. We speak the same language, we have the same customs.
Geographically, Australia is part of Asia.
Australia really belongs to the Aborigines. They were here 40,000 years before the British.
Almost every country in the world controls its immigration.
After the Second World War, Australia took about 170,000 refugees from Europe.
After the Vietnam War, Australia took about 100,000 refugees from Indochina.
Refugees are generally unskilled.
When the Second World War refugees arrived in Australia, they had the word labourer stamped on their identity papers, even though many were doctors, engineers, even priests.
The family reunion scheme means that Australia will eventually be flooded with Asians. In 1981, a survey showed that a third of the Australians believed that 10% of the population were Asians.
The present level of Asian population is 2%. By early next century, it will be around 4%.
Ethnic groups take over whole suburbs and set up their own ghettos.
Sydney's Chinatown is a tourist attraction.
If I want to eat Italian food in Melbourne, I go to Carlton.
Sydney's best Vietnamese restaurants are in Markville.
Where can you find an Australian restaurant?
Australians show racial prejudice to Asians, just as in 1950s there was prejudice against Greeks and Italians.
There was no prejudice against migrants in the 1950s because they came at a time of full employment.
When I was at school, they called me a dago.
Well, has that given you fuel for any arguments that you might have? Do you think it's worth a bit of research to check out some of the information? Well, it's over to you now. So go on, yak away, because that's it for Passwords. Bye.
I don't think anyone would disagree with me when I say Joe, Gillian and Philip have been great. It certainly pays to listen to the questions, as Phil and Joe discovered. Were you convinced by the Happy Housewife's recipe for the complete family meal? The salesman presented some good reasons to get fit, but will you do it his way? And the two kids showed you can have a debate about anything, even eating chips. Mandy really presented some way-out arguments about school uniforms, just as well the panel set her right. That's it for Passwords. Thanks for watching.